what's happening now is that they're trying to also like bomb. They will try to bomb, maybe during 1 week or two, weaken the Islamic government in Iran, and then call it a day, and then like you can need to accept that and wait for your government to collapse. The problem here is that for them, the Iranians said no. Any strike is a full, total, blown war. And the resistance faction started raising the costs. Not because they want war, but because the logic of the Americans does entail a Trumpian war. That means no costs, very short. You do it Saturday, Sunday, and then like the market's open at Mondays.
Hey everybody, this is Laith Marouf from Free Palestine TV, and we are just outside the city of Sur in South Lebanon. Before we continue with this report, I ask you to press the subscribe button on whatever social media platform you're watching this on, and to go to our website, freepalestine.video, to donate so we can continue bringing you this content. Today we are here because there was an assassination of another journalist here in Lebanon. This is the 20th journalist to be assassinated by the Zionists. Ali Noureddine, a program presenter for al-Manar television, who is also a imam for a mosque. He was heading home when his car was targeted just behind me here. We have with us returning guest, Ali Jezzini, al-Mayadeen's military analyst. Ali, thank you again for giving us your time. Let's walk a little bit away from this busy highway. This is, by the way, the main highway to the south of Lebanon. We can see all around us here the shops have been damaged severely. This is Al-Abdallah chicken, which is one of the most famous chicken places in Lebanon. Hundreds of people were shopping, eating when this targeting happened. Ali, why would they target a program presenter? It's not even a reporter, journalist doing field report. He's a famous personality on television here in Lebanon. Why would they, as Zionists, do such a thing?
Well, because it's not a precedent, because they actually managed to change international law, as we have already predicted since the beginning of the Gaza genocide. As in, they targeted more, like they almost arrived at 200 journalists dead in Gaza. Because the only journalist that's allowed to report and to actually be alive as a Western journalist, we are not treated like as Arab journalists, as counterparts. So, in the sense that they just take, say, I don't know, pretexts like in Gaza, say this journalist A, B, C, he actually filmed one of the parades of the resistance one day, He actually just gave a course, for an institution that's actually for the government in Gaza, which is mainly controlled by the Palestinian resistance before the war. So just taking these pretexts, enlarging the circle of legitimate, quote-unquote, legitimate targeting to include millions of civilians, actually, that can be, killed under any pretext. The guy, Ali, Sheikh Ali, was actually just a TV presenter. He was a journalist. But even though, like yesterday, there was something interesting, a lot of the think tankers, quote-unquote, in the US were actually, criticizing the Lebanese media for calling him a journalist because he did work for al-Manar, which is the resistance news network that has a long story of reporting on the resistance. So that just gave them the right to kill a journalist. I mean, if we want to enlarge such circle, it will include hundreds of thousands. Somebody, I don't know, sold a packet of cigarettes to a guy that was working the resistance, so kill him. Other guy.
But also, obviously, every Zionist journalist who works for media outlets that are directly connected to the Israeli government and or Netanyahu himself, like Israel Al-Yom or Israel Today, whatever it is, then they are legitimate targets.
That's not, like, And I do remember that in the war, they were actually going with the Israeli forces, you know, wearing helmets, wearing actual camouflaged vests. They didn't even have like press on them. They just like working as soldiers, which is in violation of the code of journalism. You can't wear camouflage vests. You can't wear camouflage helmets. You can't go with the army in that regard. You are a reporter for the army, such as, you know, which makes you a legitimate target as a soldier. If you want to go as a journalist, there are some principles that you should follow. And in Gaza and in such locations here, our journalists that are being targeted are always wearing vests, always wearing identifying colors. They're always having their phone. You can identify them as journalists who they are. They're not in the middle of a battle, you know, with soldiers around them wearing camouflage vests like the Israeli soldiers or journalists in this case, or sort of journalists, which most of them also served in the army.
Here inside the Gaza Strip, about 3 or 4 miles from the border. We can't say which area. We can't show the outer landscape for fear of identifying where Israeli Defense Force positions are.
So, stark contrast, but who's the legitimate target here for Western media? It's us. You cannot see it but in a racial optics, actually. There's nothing other to explain that.
Out of those 20 journalists that were martyred here in Lebanon, there's not one that is a foreign journalist. They're all Lebanese citizens. Similarly, in Palestine, all those journalists that you were referring to, the 280 journalists that were killed, were all Palestinians. There is actually, the Zionists have never killed a foreign journalist in the whole struggle that we have had over the last 80 years. And it boggles my mind when there is foreign journalists here in Lebanon that constantly talk about being targets of the Israelis as if they will be somehow killed by the Zionists. Do you think that they will ever kill a foreign journalist here working in Lebanon? That didn't happen.
Not intentionally. It will be a big headache. Do you remember that strike where they killed a few, Western, they were British and Americans for the Gaza Kitchen. I don't remember the NGO's name, and it did cause much more noise than maybe 2,000 civilians that were killed during that week, which is something, you know, I can't find the words to express to it. We shouldn't get used to it. It's not normal. Our lives have value as any other human being. But that's that they're trying to understand us. Like, if somebody, you know, in the West reads such news that 10 journalists have been killed, they're Arabs, okay, just keep sliding. But if 3 or 4 white journalists got killed, big news, you know. They won't do that because of the headache they could have, even inside Western society. It's about the cost they incur. So I would not, they turn, you know, for the Western journalists, the rules of engagement for normal journalists comes back. So they might kill them by mistake, but they will make sure that, to check if they're wearing vests, the whole thing that apply only to them. For us, it's just, maybe you have worked in a, institution or interviewed somebody in the resistance, now you're a legitimate target, you're spreading propaganda. They used actually this exact argument of propagandists, but where does the line stop and where does it start? It's them to actually make it, draw the line. And that's I'm still gonna repeat that I did say that at the beginning of the war, that the Israeli Zionist Jews are gonna draw the line for each human being, and everybody will follow because they have the US in their back, and it did happen. So they did change international law. It is legitimate to kill children. It is legitimate to massacre people based on a number that's been given by AI. How many contacts do you have that do work institutions, of the resistance in Lebanon and Gaza, and it's totally legitimate, and nobody will bat an eye. People were saying, no, this is the national law, rules-based order. That's not gonna happen. It is happening, and here we are, as if people are so, embedded in such blood and atrocities in their minds. They don't see the strangeness of it anymore. It's just the normal thing anymore. And the only thing that can change it is a flip in the balance of power. Once the same violence and the same standards that are being applied to other people is being applied to them. And I don't think they can see, because they're just so they have so much solipsism, like they don't understand. I don't think they mentally understand that they are dealing with other human beings or actually capable of reflecting as in this could happen to us, you know? It's just full massacre against what they don't consider humans. We're animals to them, as journalists, as civilians.
Obviously, the line is, do you support Jewish supremacy or against it? That makes you a target as a journalist. That's as simple as it is. And here, as we see here, there could have been hundreds of victims, people that were eating at the restaurant.
This is one of the busiest restaurants in the whole region, and this is one of the busiest areas. So if you can walk for 1-2 kilometers, it's just full of shops everywhere. There are like some malls even on the other side. If you can see here, like the shrapnel, as we see the strike is there, you know, it's around 30 to 40 meters. The shrapnel reached here, so that kind of missile they use from the Mikhuli doesn't have a lot of explosives, but the shrapnel power it has, it can still kill people at 40-50 meters if they stand in here. Maybe say there's a birthday, there's a wedding, I don't know, they always do birthdays here. So this could have been a massacre, and that's such as a lot of other occasions. They just like bombed, for instance, one time a guy in a full of area, like in, you know, in Sharia or Dwe, like there was a business area with a shop, a lot of injuries. I think it's like 15, 16 injured people back then. So they just don't care, just collaterals, even like based on the rules of engagement. They're already breaking it by killing, even if we assume they're not killing civilians, killing combatants in their daily life is a war crime. And like since yesterday, they killed 4 people, all of them are civilians. Literally.
You mentioned right now 2 things. Al-Duwair, which is obviously Hadi Hotait's hometown, and you mentioned that there's 4 civilians that were martyred over the last 24 hours. 2 of them being just outside Al-Duwair, one of them being from al-Hotait family. Those 2 were students, university students, one of them even Egyptian visiting student that is studying here at the university. So the targeting of civilians in villages that are far away from the front line is now normalized in Lebanon by the Zionists.
Yeah, it's not just like people talk about, you know, the occupied 5 points, or like about a belt that have been made that you have already visited a lot of time in Kfarkila. They say, you know, the belt 1-2 kilometers, 3 kilometers at one point, but it's not like that. There are multiple areas inside South Lebanon. You as a civilian cannot go. It's like a no-fire zone, no activity zone. If you go there, you'll get shot, like if you get spotted by drones. There are not drones all the time, but if a drone spots you, it will kill you. Like what happened probably with these 2 guys yesterday. They don't like related in any way or form, you know, to any resistance like institutions, even civilian ones, you know. One of them was even Egyptian. Hell, what does he have to do with the whole context here? But they probably were just like roaming a nights out, you know. You're not allowed, actually. There is a curfew, it seems, on that area. After a certain hour, you'll just be shot and killed without even like needing the verification and so on. Like, even, you know, in the worst case scenarios, an occupying army say will make sure, okay, are you extrajudicially killing people or not, you know, in the worst case scenario. But the Israelis are worse than we have ever seen, like anywhere. They're just imposing, you know, very random, non-specified curfews for civilians in certain areas at certain times. And if you go there, you're gonna get killed, you know. The guys were just chilling. They went like for a restaurant there and just were driving around, and they just got shot. Now 2 families, one in Egypt and one in Lebanon, are mourning their young sons. They were like 20, 21, I think.
So we had a journalist, 2 students, and the 4th martyr was a soldier of the Lebanese military. Tell us about this story.
Well, basically, the guy was a former soldier of the Lebanese army. He had some land, some groups, orange groups. He was working there. of course, same logic, as in like there are certain areas you can't work with. You know, why are you trying to collect your oranges? Why are you trying to work in your groove? There, you're not allowed. Not even, no warning, no red lines, no nothing, just extrajudicially killing. Now we have a family of orphans. He has, I think he has a daughter. He was a young man. So it's just, you know, hard to grasp. You feel sometimes very desensitized from what is happening, because it's just every day, every day, every day. And people like say, I don't like to use the term ceasefire, nor that like when I say during the war. I usually say during the intense phase of the war, because the war is still ongoing. It never stopped. That's for the Israelis. You cease, I fire. And the whole point of like people, you know, actually commenting and saying that, you know, the resistance trying to drag us into war is just invalid, because we're still at war. But obviously we're not like people also to them. For the people who are allied with the Americans here in Lebanon, they just like even by the reports of the UNIFIL, they didn't see any so-called violation of the ceasefire from our side, but it's just continuous. They couldn't spot anything. They're just, while counting more than 4,000, I think it's like 4,400 now, violations from the Israeli side, and it's just legitimate. I suggest that they write it down, you know, that Zionist supremacist Jews have the right to do everything in the UN law and charter, and then we'll be fine. We'd feel much more comfort, you know, saying that they have the right to kill people extrajudicially, and the ceasefire for them means that they can fire, and they are really the, you know, chosen bloodline, you know.
Last thing that we can talk about is Sheikh Naim al-Qasim gave a speech yesterday, and in it he said if Iran is attacked, if the Ayatollah becomes the target, that the resistance, Hezbollah and Shia groups all around the world will rise to his defense. Explain to us this position, why Sheikh Naim al-Qasim would say such a thing beyond the religious context of it. In terms of a military situation, why would Hezbollah have to stand up to defend Iran if it's attacked this time?
I don't think that there is anything strange about what he said. Basically, all militaries in the world do like that. So the Americans did came in October 7th to save the Israelis, and they will be doomed without them. They have the Monroe Doctrine to intervene in anywhere they see in South Korea, not counting the hundreds of military bases they have all around the world. But people here, the people's resistance, are not allowed to work as a group. They need to like be separated, which did cause a lot of problems during the last year. They didn't fight the battle as one. And now they say like the Americans, you know, want a clean operation, and you're not allowed to respond. So they need like to just bomb some targets. And there are some reports that they did actually try to bomb they sent a message to the Iranians, and before the whole, they brought all the fleets, that let us bomb some of the targets, and then like we'll call it a day. That's dangerous. That's gonna open up a whole new gray area where they can do whatever they want. You can't accept that. And the Iranians, of course, said not. So what's happening now is that they're trying to also like bomb. They will try to bomb, you know, maybe during 1 week or two, weaken the Islamic government in Iran, and then call it a day, and then like you can need to accept that and wait for your government to collapse. The problem here is that for them, I mean, the Iranians said no. Any strike is a full, total, blown war. And the resistance faction started raising the costs, not because that they want war, but because the logic of the Americans does entail a Trumpian war. That means no costs, very short, you know, you do it Saturday, Sunday, and then like the markets open at Monday. So by raising the costs, so what Sheikh Naim did and other resistance group in Yemen and Iraq, they're trying actually to impose a certain deterrence, to push the war away. That's counterintuitive, you know, but it's the right thing to do. As in, if you said, we're not gonna fight, there are multiple examples, and precedent says that Trump will hit you because he is a taco. Trump will always chicken out, you know, so that, like the American media calls him. So by raising the cost, you lower the chance of that strike. And also, it's just the most logical thing to do, because we, as people of the resistance here in Lebanon, will find it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to exist, not to mention like to continue resisting and to maintain our identity, if something, God forbid, happens to the Islamic regime in Iran. So any other human being or any other group will do the same. Like, if the hand doesn't like defend the heart or the brain, then what good the hand is if the heart or the brain stops, you know? People here, I have no trouble with their actual political alignment. I mean the ones that lick the boots of the West, you know? I do despise them, but if they're honest with that, you know? So they're very hypocritical, because in many other occasions, they impose certain standards that, like, you know, for instance, in Syria, they did criticize, the resistance participation in the war in Syria. And then after the former regime fell, they were actually, some of them, going to Julani to ask him to actually intervene in Lebanon. So such standards are always like, no, you can't actually stand with the Iranians or call for foreign support, but no, we will call for foreign support whenever we can.
200,000 Wahhabi death squads can be gathered from all around the world and dumped in Syria, but nobody can come to the defense of the Syrian. One last thing to mention here is that there's news over the last few months. The American military has been landing equipment, maybe troops, in Lebanon, both in Beirut airport and the Hamad airport. How should we view this?
Well, basically, it's part of NATO's bigger strategy now to cause a war that's to end all wars in the Middle East, or West Asia. I don't like to use the Middle East, because they need to very fast, to impose Israel as the sole hegemon on the Middle East, to actually switch, because the new strategy for 2026 is to actually move and control the whole of South America and to corner China. It doesn't include the Middle East. It doesn't mean that they want to have a war, but it means this is the last attempt at changing anything. So, inshallah, if we can withstand such strikes and continue resisting, the future can be much better for us, because they will have to leave West Asia. The balance of power is shifting very heavily around the globe, and they can't maintain all the fronts. So this is a positive thing. I think, this is my opinion, I think this is going to be the last attempt at US regime change in the area. And if they receive casualties, heavy casualties, they will just withdraw. They will not, Trump doesn't have support, neither popular nor economic, nor anything to actually go into a prolonged war, because some estimates, if the barrel, the oil, the crude, reaches $90, there will be a recession in the US. So that's why he can't go there. The troops here positioned in Lebanon are part of this attempt at finishing this thing once and for all. We just have to keep surviving and be here. And inshallah, victory is ours.
Inshallah, there will be a civil war in the United States. So we can see the beginnings of it in Minneapolis. Ali Jezzini, al-Mayadeen, the military analyst, thank you very much for being with us again. I'm Laith Marouf, your host. Behind the camera is Hadi. I ask you to press the subscribe button on whatever social media platform you're watching this on one more time, and to go to our website, freepalestine.video, to donate so we can continue bringing you this content. And until we see you next time, I bid you all a free Palestine and a free Lebanon.